ScouterStan. It's often said that the Aids to Scouting for NCOs and Men by Baden-Powell was the very first scouting document. And there's a lot of mystery and controversy about a lot of the things that happen within the book. So here are 5 unknown or lesser known facts about this amazing book. Number 1, the Aids to Scouting. I'll just shorten it so that you know what I'm talking about. It can be rather lengthy. But the Aids to Scouting was almost captured in South Africa during the siege of Mafeking. BP was finishing the final copy of the manuscript while stationed at Mafeking. And early in October of 1899, he was able to get it out of Mafeking, South Africa, and on its way to England. It was probably one of the last communications coming out of the city during that time. The siege went on for almost a year, and Baden-Powell was actually known to say that if he had the manuscript there, it would have definitely been burned, along with a lot of other documents that were burned during the siege. Number 2, in 1899, the Aids to Scouting was not Baden-Powell's first book. His first book was published back in 1884, named Reconnaissance and Scouting. Number 3, Aids to Scouting is just like any other of the books that BP authored for the military. It was always intended to be a guide to help train scouts in the military. When it was published in 1900, back home in England, the siege of Mafeking was still ongoing. So back in England, many of the boy brigades that still exist today started to pick up this new book and made it extremely popular. Number 4, the book was meant to be small enough to fit in a raincoat pocket or a saddlebag. It was intended to be used as a field reference guide. Now, in later editions, it featured a red cover, replacing the traditional gray cover that many of the military books of that time. Number 5, Boys of the Empire magazine, on December 28th, 1901, did an article about Aids to Scouting and Baden-Powell. In that article, the words Boy Scouts was used for the very first time. Baden-Powell was proclaimed to be a hero of the siege of Mafeking. And the article reflected a lot of the opinions of the day. It heralded the Aids to Scouting as a critical book for scouting skills. Since that time, in 1915, there was a reissuance of Aids to Scouting with 14 chapters and 57 pages. Now, the pages varied. Sometimes the printing would be larger or the book would be smaller, so it increased or decreased the amount of pages. In addition to that, all of the illustrations were done by BP, and they had their individual page where there was no printing on the back and no printing on the facing other side of the book. It was very hit and miss as far as how many pages. Some of the content would just be crossed out from the military standpoint or removed altogether. From the 1915 edition on, it was treated as a youth book, even though the cover title never changed. Now, there are a lot of books out there online that can be downloaded and read, and we need to look at it from the standpoint of a historic value. There's content in there from the author. Those words are literally the thoughts of the person writing them. So we can't really use today's judgment for whatever reason, any kind of sensitivity. It's difficult to put that judgment on that individual without looking at it from their standpoint. Now, in the United States, we often say Baden-Powell. When I was growing up and throughout my history in scouting, I've done this for some time now. This was the way it was pronounced, the way it was taught just about everybody in the United States. Now, recently, there was a recording, an MP3, of an old letter that Baden-Powell actually pronounced his name that way in this recording. It was actually a correspondence. It was like a Victrola type cylinder of resin and it wasn't that great. I mean, the MP3, they tried to, make it work right, but it was a little fast. It sounded like he was yelling. It was definitely hard to understand. But he quite literally said Baden-Powell. Now, that could have been a distortion or something. So Baden-Powell or Baden-Powell, same person. So regardless if you go by the English pronunciation or the Americanized pronunciation. Now, Baden-Powell, Baden-Powell didn't like being referred to that way. He wanted to be called BP. And that sounds the same no matter how you say it. In my humble opinion, both pronunciations are the same, but BP is what he wanted to be known as. I believe that the motto of scouting, be prepared, BP, have a lot in common. And that's what we're doing. We are preparing young people for the future, giving them scout skills and leadership skills. This is just not done anywhere else. And we work really hard with our youth to develop all of those wonderful skills that they will need in the future. I am so proud of you and all the hard work you do for our young scouts. And I want to encourage you to keep up that good, hard work. And someday, I hope to see you on the trail.